Before Sweden had its own coins, trade was still very active. During the Viking Age, which lasted from about the 8th to the 11th century, a different system was used. This system was based on the weight of precious metals, mainly silver. Vikings were great traders and travelers. They journeyed far and wide from the rivers of Russia to the markets of the Middle East. They brought back silver in many forms. This included jewelry like arm rings and necklaces, but also foreign coins from places like the Byzantine Empire and the Arab Caliphates. These items were not used as coins with a fixed value. Instead, their worth was determined by how much pure silver they contained. To make a payment, a Viking would use a small set of scales. He would place the silver object on one side and weights on the other. If an item was too large, it was simply cut into smaller pieces. This practice is why archaeologists often find fragments of silver, known as hack silver, in Viking hoards. It shows that the appearance of the object was less important than its material weight. These hoards, buried for safekeeping, give us a clear picture of the wealth and trade connections of the time. The silver was a universal currency, understood and accepted across different cultures, making it perfect for international commerce. This weight-based economy was practical but also had its limitations. It required everyone to carry scales and trust that the silver was pure. The process could be slow and inconvenient, especially for smaller transactions. Imagine trying to buy bread by cutting a tiny piece from a silver bracelet. The need for a more standardized and efficient system was growing. The foreign coins that flowed into Scandinavia, particularly English pennies and German pfennigs, introduced the idea of uniform, state-guaranteed money. People began to see the benefits of having small, round pieces of silver with a known value, which did not need to be weighed every single time. This period laid the groundwork for Sweden's own monetary history. The large amounts of silver accumulated during the Viking Age provided the raw material for future coinage. More importantly, it established a culture familiar with using silver as the primary means of exchange. The transition from weighing silver to counting coins would be a natural next step. The sight of organized, stamped coins from more established kingdoms planted a seed. It would not be long before a Swedish king decided that his own kingdom needed its own currency, a symbol of power and a tool for a more modern economy. The story of Swedish coinage begins around the year 995 AD. The king responsible was Olof Skötkonung, a ruler who is considered one of the first kings of a unified Sweden. He was also the first Swedish king to be baptized as a Christian. To assert his authority and modernize his kingdom, Olof decided to mint the first Swedish coins. He established a mint in the town of Sigtuna, which was an important political and commercial center at the time. This was a major step. It signaled a move away from the old Viking system of using silver by weight and towards a more organized, state-controlled economy where the king guaranteed the value of the money. When Olof Skötkonung decided to create his own coins, he did not invent a new design from scratch. Instead, he looked to a successful model from across the North Sea, the English penny. At that time, English pennies, especially those of King Athelred II, were widely circulated and trusted throughout Northern Europe. They were known for their consistent weight and silver content. The first Swedish coins, known as penningar, were therefore close copies of these English pennies. They were small, thin silver coins featuring a portrait of the king on one side and a cross on the other. The inscriptions were in Latin and often included the king's name and the location of the mint. The production of these early coins was not carried out by Swedes. Olof hired skilled moneyers from England to run his mint in Sigtuna. Their names, such as Godwine and Leofman, sometimes appear on the coins themselves. This shows how much the early Swedish minting process relied on foreign expertise. These English moneyers brought their tools, their knowledge, and their design standards with them. The result was a coin that looked familiar and trustworthy to international traders. By imitating the English penny, Olof made sure his new currency would be accepted both within his kingdom and beyond its borders. However, this first attempt at a national currency did not last long. After Olof Skötkonung's reign, the production of coins in Sweden stopped for about 150 years. The country seemed to revert to its older economic habits, relying once again on foreign coins and the weight of silver. It is not entirely clear why the minting ceased. It could have been due to political instability, a lack of silver, or simply that the economy was not yet ready for such a centralized system. Despite this long pause, Olof Skötkonung's initiative was a vital first chapter. He had introduced the concept of a native Swedish coin, an idea that would be revived and would eventually form the foundation of the nation's monetary system. After the long pause that followed Olof Skötkonung's first coins, minting in Sweden resumed in the mid-12th century. This time, it was here to stay. During the medieval period, Sweden developed a complex but organized accounting system to manage its currency. This system was not based on a single coin but on a hierarchy of values. The smallest unit was the silver penning, the direct descendant of the early coins. However, people did not just count individual penningar for large sums. Instead, they used units of account. The most important of these were the ore and the mark. This system was common across much of Northern Europe, which made trade easier. The relationship between these units was fixed, at least in theory. A certain number of penningar made up one ore, and a certain number of ore made up one mark. For example, one mark was typically equal to 8 ore, and one ore was equal to 24 penningar. This meant that one mark was worth 192 penningar. It is important to remember that the mark and the ore were initially just concepts for counting. They were not actual coins you could hold. When someone owed a debt of 1 mark, they would pay it using 192 individual penning coins. This system allowed for the calculation of large sums without needing impossibly large numbers of coins. The value of the penning itself was not stable. Over the centuries, kings and rulers often found themselves short of money. A common way to solve this was to debase the currency. This meant that new coins were minted with less silver in them, often mixed with cheaper metals like copper. As a result, the penning lost value over time. While a mark was still defined as 192 penningar, the total amount of silver in those 192 coins was much less than it used to be. This led to confusion and inflation. People had to constantly adjust their understanding of how many debased penningar were needed to equal the value of an old pure silver coin. Sweden's trade with other countries also had a big impact on its money. The Hanseatic League, a powerful commercial and defensive confederation of merchant guilds and market towns in northwestern and central Europe, dominated trade in the Baltic Sea. German merchants brought their own coins and accounting systems which influenced Sweden's. Coins from cities like Lübeck were common in Swedish markets. This created a complex monetary landscape where many different types of coins circulated at the same time. A Swedish merchant had to be an expert in exchange rates, able to convert the value of a local Swedish penning to a German Witten or an English sterling. The 16th century brought massive changes to Sweden, and its currency was no exception. King Gustav Vasa, who came to the throne in 1523, is often called the founder of modern Sweden. He broke away from the Danish-led Kalmar Union, carried out the Protestant Reformation, and centralized the power of the state. A key part of his plan was to create a strong, unified national currency. He wanted to end the confusing mess of debased medieval coins and the dominance of foreign money. His reforms laid the foundation for the Swedish monetary system that would last for centuries. He introduced new, larger silver coins to stabilize the economy. The most important new coin introduced by Gustav Vasa was the dollar. The name came from the large silver Joachimsthaler coins minted in Bohemia, which were trusted all over Europe. The Swedish dollar was a large, impressive silver coin with a high and stable silver content. It was intended to be the new standard for large transactions and international trade, replacing the old abstract mark system. Alongside the daler, Gustav Vasa also minted smaller denominations, including the mark itself as a physical coin for the first time. The new system was, 1 daler was equal to 3 mark, and 1 mark was equal to 8 ore. This reform was not just about introducing new coins, it was about taking control of the country's mineral wealth. Sweden had rich silver mines, most notably the Sala silver mine. Gustav Vasa nationalized the mines and used the silver to produce his new high-quality currency. By doing so, he could guarantee the value of the coins and increase the crown's revenues. However, Sweden also had an even greater resource: copper. The massive copper mine at Falun was one of the most important in Europe. Gustav Vasa began to mint coins from copper as well, creating a dual metal system where both silver and copper coins were in circulation. This created a new problem. The value of silver and the value of copper in the international market were always changing. This meant that the official exchange rate set by the king, for example, how many copper ore equaled 1 silver daler, could quickly become wrong. If the value of copper fell, people would need more copper coins to get 1 silver coin, leading to inflation for those who used copper money. This bimetallic system, with its fluctuating exchange rates between silver and copper, would cause economic headaches for Sweden for the next 200 years. Gustav Vasa's reforms were a huge step forward, but they also introduced new complexities. In the 17th century, Sweden became a major European power. This period, which we now call the Swedish Empire, was actually funded by the nation's immense copper resources from the Falun mine. But as the value of silver was rising across Europe, and the supply of Swedish silver was dwindling, it became really difficult for Sweden to maintain its silver daler as the main currency. The government, under King Gustav II Adolf and later Queen Kristina, made a radical decision. Sweden would shift to a copper standard. The official value of the currency would be based on copper, not silver. This was, honestly, a unique move in Europe at the time. This led to the creation of one of the most remarkable types of money ever made, platmint, or plate money. Because copper was so much less valuable than silver, a coin with a high value had to contain a huge amount of metal. So to create a coin equivalent to a silver daler, you actually needed a lot of copper. The solution was to make giant rectangular plates of copper, some weighing up to 20 kilograms, about 44 pounds. Each plate had stamps in the corners and in the center to indicate its value, the date, and the king's mark. These were not coins you could carry in your purse. They were slabs of metal that had to be transported by horse and cart. Carrying around enormous plates of copper was obviously not practical. This impracticality led to another world-changing innovation. A man named Johan Palmstruck founded the Stockholm Banco in 1657. In 1661, he came up with a brilliant idea. People could deposit their heavy copper plate money at his bank for safekeeping. In return, the bank would issue a paper certificate, a receipt that promised to pay the bearer the equivalent amount of copper on demand. These certificates, called kreditivsedlar, or credit notes, could be traded just like money. This was, in fact, the birth of the first official banknotes in Europe. They were much more convenient than the heavy plates they represented. Unfortunately, the Stockholm Banco issued too many banknotes without enough copper plates in its vaults to back them up. This led to a loss of confidence, a run on the bank, and its eventual collapse in 1667. However, the idea was just too good to disappear. The Swedish parliament, the Riksdag, learned from this failure. In 1668, they established their own bank, the Riksens Standardsbank, which means the Bank of the Estates of the Realm. This new institution was under state control and was tasked with managing the nation's currency. Today, it is known as the Sveriges Riksbank and is the world's oldest central bank. It was born directly from the problems created by giant copper money. The 18th century was a period of reform and, well, attempts to simplify Sweden's complicated currency situation. The dual system of silver and copper, along with the fluctuating values and the legacy of plate money, had created a confusing economic environment. There were actually different accounting systems running at the same time, one based on the silver daler, daler silver mint, and another based on the copper daler, daler copper mint. The exchange rate between them was not stable, causing constant problems for trade and daily life. The primary goal of the 18th century reforms was to create a single unified monetary system based on silver. In 1776, a major currency reform was enacted under King Gustav III. The goal was to finally get rid of the dual copper-silver standard and establish a new, reliable silver-based unit. This new unit was called the riksdaler. All old coins and accounting systems were to be converted to this new standard. One riksdaler was divided into 48 skilling, and one skilling was further divided into 12 rundstecken. This was a clear attempt to create a single, straightforward system for the entire country. The government recalled the old, confusing coins and issued new ones denominated in riksdaler and skilling. But the transition was not easy. For many years, people continued to think in terms of the old dollar and mark systems. The government had to work hard to make the new riksdaler system the single standard. New coins were minted, from small copper 1/4 skilling pieces to large silver riksdaler coins. The design of these coins also became more standardized, usually featuring the monarch's portrait or monogram, and the national coat of arms. This helped to create a sense of national unity and state authority. The era of giant plate money was officially over, replaced by a more modern and manageable set of coins. However, political turmoil continued to affect the currency. Sweden fought several wars during this period, including against Russia. wars are expensive and governments often resort to printing money to pay for them. The state began to issue huge amounts of paper money which was not fully backed by silver in the Riksbank's vaults. This caused the value of the paper riksdaler to fall compared to the value of the silver coins. Once again, Sweden had two parallel currencies, the riksdaler riksgolds, paper money, and the riksdaler specie, silver coin, with a constantly changing exchange rate between them. The dream of a simple unified currency remained just out of reach. The 19th century was a time of industrialization and modernization across Europe, and Sweden was very much part of this trend. The complex and often unstable riksdaler system was seen as outdated. A major global trend was the move towards decimalization, basing currency systems on the number 10. This made calculations much simpler than the old systems of 12s, 24s or 48s. In 1855, Sweden took its first big step in this direction. A reform decided that the riksdaler riksmynt would be divided into 100 öre. The old skilling coins were phased out and new öre coins were introduced. This was honestly a hugely important simplification of daily commerce. The biggest change, however, came in 1873. Sweden decided to join a new currency union with Denmark. This was the Scandinavian Monetary Union. Norway, which was in a union with Sweden at the time, joined 2 years later in 1875. To make this union possible, all three countries had to adopt a new currency with the same value. They chose the name Krona in Sweden and Norway, or Kron in Denmark, which means crown. This new currency, the Swedish Krona, replaced the riksdaler. The exchange rate was simple. 1 riksdaler was equal to 1 krona. The krona, like the riksdaler before it, was decimalized and divided into 100 öre. The Scandinavian Monetary Union was based on the gold standard. This meant that the value of the krona was fixed to a certain amount of gold. The central banks of Sweden, Denmark and Norway guaranteed that their banknotes could be exchanged for gold coins upon request. The coins of each country were legal tender in all three nations. A Danish 20 krone gold coin was accepted in Stockholm, and a Swedish 1 krona silver coin could be used in Copenhagen. This created a large, stable economic zone in Scandinavia, which greatly boosted trade, investment and travel between the member countries. The new krona coins were modern and standardized. The system included gold coins, 5, 10 and 20 kroner, silver coins, 1 and 2 kroner plus smaller 10, 25 and 50 öre, and bronze coins, 1, 2 and 5 öre. The designs featured the reigning monarch's portrait or monogram and the Swedish coat of arms, establishing a visual identity that would continue for over a century. The Scandinavian Monetary Union was a great success for several decades. It provided monetary stability and economic integration. However, the outbreak of the First World War in 1914 would ultimately bring this era of cooperation to an end. The 20th century was marked by 2 world wars and significant economic upheaval, all of which left a clear mark on Sweden's coins. Although Sweden remained neutral in both conflicts, its economy was deeply affected. The outbreak of World War I in 1914 caused the collapse of the gold standard and the Scandinavian Monetary Union. The free exchange of gold and coins between the Scandinavian countries ended. Sweden, like other nations, experienced shortages of important metals like copper, nickel, and silver, which were needed for the war industry. This forced the mint to change the materials used for its coins. During and after both World War I and World War II, bronze and silver coins were often replaced by coins made of iron. Iron is cheap and plentiful, but it has a major disadvantage. It rusts easily. These wartime coins were often smaller and lighter than their predecessors and had a much shorter lifespan. For example, the 1, 2 and 5 öre coins were minted in iron for several years. After the wars, as the economy recovered, the mint gradually returned to using bronze and cupronickel, an alloy of copper and nickel, for its coins. The silver content of higher value coins was also reduced over time and eventually eliminated completely in the 1960s. The design of Swedish coins has evolved slowly, maintaining a strong sense of tradition. For most of the 20th and 21st centuries, the obverse, the front of the coins, has featured the portrait or monogram of the reigning monarch. The reverse, the back, typically shows the coin's value and the 3 crowns, a national symbol of Sweden. The long reign of King Gustav VI Adolf from 1950 to 1973, and the current reign of King Carl XVI Gustaf since 1973, have given the coinage a sense of continuity. However, in 2016, a new series of coins was introduced with completely new designs. including a new portrait of the king and modern, stylized representations of themes like the sun, wind, and water. For most of its history, Sweden's coins were produced by a state-owned mint, the Royal Mint, Kungliga Myntverket, located first in Stockholm and later in Eskilstuna. However, as the use of cash declined, the business of minting coins became less profitable. In 2002, the Swedish mint was privatized and sold to the Mint of Finland. After a few years, the mint in Eskilstuna was closed down in 2011. Since then, Sweden has outsourced the production of its coins. The current series of Krona coins are produced by a mint in the Netherlands. This marks a major break in a long tradition of Sweden producing its own money. In the late 20th and early 21st centuries, the role of physical coins in Sweden began to change dramatically. Due to inflation over many decades, the smallest denominations of coins became practically worthless. Their production cost was higher than their face value. This led to a gradual process of withdrawing small coins from circulation. The 1 and 2 ore coins were withdrawn in the 1970s, the 5 and 25 ore in the 1980s and 90s, and finally, the 50 ore coin was withdrawn in 2010. This marked the end of the ore as a physical coin, although it remains as a unit for electronic accounting. Cash prices in shops are now rounded to the nearest whole krona. As Sweden entered the European Union in 1995, a major question arose. Should Sweden adopt the EU's single currency, the euro? A national referendum on the issue was held on September 14, 2003. The debate was, honestly, quite intense, with arguments focusing on economic stability, national identity, and democratic control over monetary policy. The result was a clear rejection of the euro, with 55.9% of voters choosing to keep the krona. This decision has defined Sweden's monetary path in the 21st century, keeping it outside the eurozone alongside countries like Denmark and the United Kingdom before its departure from the EU. The krona remains a powerful symbol of Swedish sovereignty. The most significant recent development is Sweden's rapid move towards a cashless society. Swedes are among the world's leading users of digital payment methods, such as credit cards, debit cards, and mobile payment apps like Swish. Many shops, cafes, and even museums no longer accept cash at all. This trend has drastically reduced the demand for and circulation of coins and banknotes. The Riksbank has noted that the use of cash is declining faster in Sweden than in any other country. This has led to a national debate about the future of money and the potential risks of a fully digital economy, such as accessibility for the elderly and vulnerability to cyber attacks. Today, the Swedish krona exists in a unique state. The current coin series, introduced in 2016, consists of a 1 krona, 2 krona, and 5 krona coin, along with a new 10 krona coin design. The 2 krona coin was reintroduced after being absent for 45 years. These coins are smaller, lighter, and made from new alloys. They feature the portrait of King Carl XVI Gustav and designs inspired by nature. While these modern coins are technically advanced and secure, they are seen less and less in daily life. Sweden's long and fascinating history of coinage, from Viking hack silver to giant copper plates, may be entering its final chapter as the country pioneers the path towards a digital monetary future.